For the sake of continuity, my previous two reviews were Logopolis, followed by K9 and Company, A Girl's Best Friend. After this video, my next review will be Castrovalva. I'll have plenty of timestamps on screen and in the description below, so you can jump ahead and keep track. Also, apologies for the atrocious lighting in this video. It's my first time making a review since having this horrible new light fixture installed in my apartment that shines brighter than the sun, so I'm hoping to find a way to work around it going forward. With all that being said, time for a relevant flashback. Could there potentially be one more Fourth Doctor adventure I've forgotten about that needs to be covered? Guess you'll have to tune in next time to find out. New Year 2025. Hello and welcome to the mystery review that I've been hinting at for quite a while now. My goodness, that light is bright. The final Fourth Doctor review, yes. But it's not just any odd classic serial, no. But a tale with legendary status and a history woven throughout the very fabric of Whovian culture. This is Doctor Who, Scratchman. Indeed, my friends, I'm about to embark on quite the journey. Believe me when I tell you I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while. And after putting off getting that bizarre K9 and Company review out, I am done procrastinating. Yep, all I gotta do is read this book and I'm good to go. Shouldn't take that long at all, there's absolutely nothing stopping me, so let's do this! I kinda suck at reading.
I don't have a musical intro.
Yeah, hi all. Sorry to keep you waiting. In the past, when I've had a big break between reviews, it's normally for something arbitrary, like waiting on a 60s era animation to release, or dealing with some personal life tragedy. And yep, sure, there's more than enough malarkey life's been thrown my way. For the sake of brevity, here's just a quick list of the crap I've been dealing with since October last year, when I actually finished wrapping up production on my Season 18 reviews. But a big part of this delay has also just been the fact that I'm really not cut out for reading. Sure, back in 2021, when I was sat behind a desk at work with not much else to do but read 10th Doctor stories, it was easy. But hand on my heart, truth be told, pretty much every time I went to pick this up, it went something like this. Oh yeah, I suppose I could make a start on a chapter just as soon as I finish this match and maybe got a platinum trophy. Finally, a day off to relax, no responsibility. I might do some dishes, maybe do the laundry. Ah, man, I'm just so bored. There's nothing to do, nothing to watch, nothing to play. Nope. Alright, you know what? No more playing around, no more distractions. I'm turning off the PlayStation, I'm switching off the internet, I'm shutting down the laptop. I am going to sit down and I am going to read this book. I am going to finish a chapter, and that's going to be the only thing I focus on for the rest of the day. Alright. But even when I did have the self-control to dedicate time to sitting down and actually reading, my ADHD would kick into overdrive and my mind would wander. I know I've hinted at it before on the channel, but I can't remember if I've ever outright stated it, but yeah, I've got that potent ADHD. And not the Gen Z self-diagnosed in a TikTok video kind of way. No, I'm talking like early 2000s medical practitioner ready to diagnose and shape the rest of your life kind of way. And one of the many glorious effects of my particular condition is whenever I see a big page of words, my brain just whoop, switches off immediately. Which is great for making scripted videos. I know it's become a bit of a meme to rag on the media illiteracy of today's youth. I hope I still count as a youth and whatnot. Call me lazy, call me stupid. I don't care. You certainly wouldn't be the first. I suck at reading. And to cut myself some slack, this ain't no BBC Easy Reads book. No, mate. This is a hefty 300 plus page double whammy. That's right, 2 books in one. But before I get too far ahead of myself, allow me to give you a bit of a book backstory. For anyone not already in the know, I imagine the first thing that immediately jumps out to you is that this is a Doctor Who novel written by a Doctor Who, Tom Baker himself. That's what caught my eye back in 2019 when this was first announced and released. A Fourth Doctor book written by the Fourth Doctor. I mean, come on, there's got to be a pretty good backstory behind that one. Sure enough, there is. Sometime in the mid-70s, although I swear the book mistakenly says mid-80s, presumably around the time of the production of seasons 12 and 13, when the Fourth Doctor was travelling alongside Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan, behind the scenes, during busy shooting schedules when they weren't needed on set, Tom Baker and Harry's actor Ian Marter would concoct this story idea called Doctor Who meets Scratchman. A vague concept they would slowly flesh out and incrementally build upon until one thing led to another and they had a reasonably fleshed out draft of a movie script. That's condensing down a massive amount of history and information, but what I imagine started out as a bit of a, Tom, I say, what's a 7-letter word for a food that can solve any situation? Jelly babies. I think that's a bit longer than 7 letters. Tell me, Ian, what do you think of the idea of spooky skeletons and interdimensional beings? That then ballooned into one of numerous unmade classic Doctor Who stories. Doctor Who meets Scratchman, Doctor Who meets the Cricket Man, the son of Doctor Who, anything to do with the Valeyard. And you know how Doctor Who fans are. They are never one to let something like that fade into obscurity. So, fast forward a few decades, and with the help of assistant authors and archivists, the legendary Tom Baker himself authored Doctor Who Scratchman, based on that idea him and his friend came up with so long ago. I don't know about you, but that's enough reason for me to give this one a go. And that brings us to today, mid-2025, when I finally finished it after owning it for who knows how many years. And please believe me when I say I have no idea where to start. I could remake this video 3 or 4 times and still find things I forgot to mention. Like giant genetically engineered supermoths. I wrote 5,000 plus words and completely forgot to mention the moths. Oh well, I'm sure people will mention them in the comments. Right, I guess a good place to start as any would be elaborating on the not too obvious fact that this is actually 2 books in one. Book 1, The Long Night, and Book 2, Scratchman. For the sake of spoilers, I will be very tight-lipped on the second book in particular because for one reason or another, I believe this book's popularity will only grow in years to come. One very specific reason that I'll discuss at the end of the review. Let's dive in, shall we? The first thing that stood out to me was the narrative perspective of this whole adventure. The whole thing is entirely written from the Doctor's point of view, in first person. I don't think I've ever read a Doctor Who book written from a specific character's perspective. It was a little bit of an adjustment, but after a while I came to appreciate and realise that it was all the better for it. Tom's always said he wasn't playing a character on Doctor Who. The Fourth Doctor was just him, amplified. So, by extension, he is the Fourth Doctor. Wow, riveting insight, Dirvinator. This, I imagined, may have created a writing obstacle when telling parts of the story where the Doctor wasn't present. But they, and when I say they throughout this video, I'm referring to Tom Baker and assistant co-author James Gost, they managed to circumvent this by often beginning other characters' chapters with things like, as Sarah later told me, or I surmise, or I guess this is what was going on. Admittedly, this does get a lot less frequent, the whole beginning things by saying, as I later surmised, especially in Book 2. I don't think they just forgot about that element. But I reckon they probably just trusted that the reader was along for the ride and well enough informed that they could just naturally assume the Doctor knew what people were doing when they weren't in his immediate presence. Another narrative framing technique that is pretty integral to the overarching story and arguably the connective tissue between everything is Book 1, The Long Night, and Book 2, Scratchman are both being recounted and retold in first person by the Doctor in essentially another rendition of the Trial of a Time Lord serial. The book opens up with the Doctor on trial, again for, let's just say, typical Gallifreyan bureaucracy. Basically just another example of the pompous higher-ups in Time Lord society don't like the way that the Doctor bends the oh-so-precious rules to do something small like, I don't know, saving the entire universe. Again. It's a simple yet effective framing device, and they often cut back to the trial in between chapters, so the Doctor can teach the Time Lords about fear. Fear being the big theme of these books. The last thing I want to mention before discussing the story is something that was a bit of a hurdle for me to conquer, and that was Tom Baker's incredibly vast vocabulary. This thing is chocked full of old-timey vernacular. Ancient turn of phrases, words, stuff not heard in modern-day speech for decades. What the heck is bonhomie? I was constantly Googling words. It reminded me of back in the day when I would read the novelizations of the Assassin's Creed series, and for Assassin's Creed 2, they had an entire glossary at the back of the book used to translate all these foreign phrases. I was still a teenager at the time, and I remember back then being not necessarily frustrated, but just confused as to why the author chose to fill this book with all these French and Italian words that you had to constantly keep going back and forth to the back of the book just to understand what you were reading. Well, this was a bit of a similar situation. Not necessarily frustrating, but as I said, I was constantly searching these terms that I had never heard before. And that brings us to a short interlude I like to call, "What the heck are any of these words, Tom?" Again, please feel free to skip ahead if this is going to bore you, and if you knew any of these terms before my reading, please let me know in the comments below. Nethercot, a place name. No, this one was just a jacket. Bourgeois, I actually knew what this word was, mostly because of Lady Gaga, but I had no idea it was spelled Biorgios. It's all the vowels. Crinoline, one of those big, poofy, fancy dresses Elizabeth Swann wears in Pirates of the Caribbean. Close of business. It basically just means the end of the business day. Why didn't you just say that? That's straight up a country. Mirthless, just an ironic smile. Piety, acts of charity. It's meager. I know what meager means. I just, again, didn't know it was spelled miagri. Stolid, not solid, stolid, calm, dependable, and showing little emotion or animation. Supplicant, a religious term. Shellac, commercial resin marketed in the form of amber flakes made from secretions of lacked insect. A tiny Ooh. Dirk, a long-bladed thrusting dagger. So a shellac dirk is the dagger made of the bug secretion. Stygian. I still don't quite understand this one. Stately. Impressive in size, or grand in scale. So, Tom Baker's ego back in the 80s. Vociferously. Just loud and forceful.
Roomy.
It's pronounced roomy? Just means you got tears in your eyes. Capitulation. The act of ceasing to resist an opponent or demand. That's just a fun word to say. Choir. That's how I thought choir was spelt back in primary school. Something to do with books or a part of a church? This one was interesting. I learned a bit of history about this. The white feather is where people would go around giving white feathers to conscientious objectors back in one of the world wars, and it's just an interesting thing to learn about. Equanimity, calmness and composure, especially in a difficult situation. I know a few people in real life that could use that. Ribald, like a dirty joke. Scapegrace. Scapegrace, that's a gin. That's a gin and tonic. A mischievous or wayward person, especially a young person or a child. A rascal. They named a gin and tonic after a rascal. Okay. Tragedian, an actor who specializes in tragic roles. Oh gosh, like that annoying Instagram guy that my friend keeps sending me videos of. Shout out to Anna. Piteous, deserving of a cry. So, Kung Fu Panda 2 or David Tennant's Regeneration. Palsy, another term for paralysis. I should know that one. Unctuous, excessively flattering. Cagoule, a lightweight hooded jacket. It's another jacket again, like Nethercot. That's enough for now. With that out of the way, I guess I should finally give some spoiler-free insight into the general plot of this thing, once I find my hat. Well, Book 1 is a terrifying tale that sees the Doctor, Sarah and Harry land on a nice quiet island somewhere in the vicinity of Scotland. Nothing's immediately dangerous or sinister. What begins as a simple spoilt picnic soon turns to terror when the overabundance of scarecrows, and brace yourself, this is an entirely original concept right here, the scarecrows come to life! Dun dun dun! Oh, how cliché you might assume. Oh, buddy, believe you me, there is a lot more going on here than simple sentient scarecrows. Can the TARDIS trio save the day, save the island, and save the locals? Well, perhaps not all of those things can be saved. Especially when the Doctor comes up against his most dangerous, pure evil opponent yet, an adversary the likes of which we've never seen in all of Doctor Who. A force that would instill fear in the hearts of any mortal man. A threat so great even the Daleks would flee in terror. The cruel, the detestable, the absolute worst of the worst, Mrs. Mavis Tulloch. This rude, selfish, entitled old boomer is the kind of woman who takes pride in being the nastiest piece of work. A truly reprehensible, judgmental, unredeemable so-and-so who would happily throw you to the wolves just because she could. Or, I don't know, maybe lock you out of her grocery store while you're banging on the door screaming for help about to be murdered. Oh, this is a truly hateable character, and I bet old Tom Baker had quite a few real-life experiences to pull from to realise this character so vividly. I bet he had a field day writing her dialogue. And by the time book 1 wraps up, rather suddenly, mind you, it's hard to believe that there could even be anything as evil in the entire galaxy. Well, what if I told you that there was an entity so evil and so powerful that it was pushing its way into our reality from another galaxy, another dimension? Book 2, Scratchman, introduces the titular character, Scratchman, a pan-dimensional being of seemingly limitless power, with the ability to instantaneously warp reality as we know it. How on earth is the Doctor supposed to win against that? Well, with a descent into the very depths of fear itself, I will leave the rest up to you, should you decide to purchase a copy of Scratchman. Or, I don't know, maybe look up a plot synopsis online, because reading is hard. And with my briefest of brief looks into the plot concluded, that brings us to my greatest shame, dear viewers. Because yes, like I just said, reading can be difficult for some people, and after struggling to get through the first book after a couple of months, I bit the bullet and signed up for a 1-month free trial of audible.com and listened to the rest of it in audiobook format. I know, I'm sorry, but if I haven't emphasized it enough in this video, I was struggling to get through this. And you know what? I don't regret it, because hearing the legend himself, Tom Baker, read his own novel, complete with nonsensical impressions and off-the-cuff laughter, it was so much more enjoyable than feeling guilty every day I wasn't reading a page or two. Even then, it still took me nearly the full month to finish it. I'm easily distracted, okay? It's a miracle I've somehow managed to keep up with even the modern series, which is amazing, by the way. Okay, trying to refocus and get back on track. A big reason why I was struggling on top of my ADHD and distractions and whatnot is something that not many Google reviews people shared, and that was a bit of criticism I had. The novel's pacing is a little bit all over the place. It moves swiftly to a point, and then just out of nowhere starts to drag on and on with filler. Some of the filler I was fine with, some of the filler I thought was pointless. Just subjective taste, I suppose. But there were definitely several moments where a page or two would go by, where stuff was happening, but the plot was just not progressing. It was only every so often, but I'd like to think that experienced readers would also come to the same conclusion. I'm not a book critic, right? I can barely string together enough cohesive sentences to talk about classic Doctor Who episodes, but being honest again, there were times where it was hard enough picking up the book to read it because I had left it on a real slog, and in my head I'm thinking, this book is hardly a page-turner, is it? But then there are other occasions where I'm fully invested, blasting through page after page, thinking to myself, this is a literal page-turner. So yeah, I think identifying the pacing as the issue for me probably makes the most sense. Makes me think of the quote on the front cover. The writing never loses its sparkle, a timeless joy. Timeless joy? Well, that's a frickin' lie, isn't it? When was the last time you heard the name Sophonisba? If I didn't switch the audiobook, I would have never had any clue how to pronounce that name correctly. She was a great character too. One of those all-time quintessential Doctor Who type characters where you look at and you think to yourself, you know what? Yep, that right there is why the Doctor loves coming back to Earth so much. Sophonisba Moat, the complete antithesis to Mavis Tulloch. Ooh, those two characters create an excellent dynamic in the first book. Oh, but how about the main big bad himself, Scratchman? Well, the less I say, the better the chances of me not accidentally letting any potential spoilers slip. But I will say, on a personal note, I didn't really appreciate what they sorta referred to him as. Like, they equate him to something in our world, but I took that to mean more in a metaphorical sense, rather than a literal one. Scratchman is his own entity, and a seriously compelling one at that. Trying to tie these last few minutes of rambling together, the character of Scratchman and the style of writing, when I first picked this up, I was reminded of that feeling I had back in 2021 when I first started reading Stone Rose and immediately could hear David Tennant and Billie Piper's voices in my head and perfectly envision the events of the story playing out in my mind. And that, to me, is the true joy of reading. Inspiring imagination. I mean, one person could read this and see the most grotesque body horror imaginable, and someone else can watch this and be like, ha, Day of the Triffids. And in a similar vein, when I began book 1, The Long Night, I could immediately envision it all playing out in my head. The smaller aspect ratio, the slightly grainy footage, the unique line delivery and mannerisms of Sarah and Harry, which in Harry's case is really saying something, because I don't remember him making that much of an impact on me outside of his habit of saying, I say, old girl. But yes, me old imagination circuits were wearing away while reading most of this. That was probably the most fun bits of this whole experience. I could literally see in my mind how this would play out, what it would look like if it was made as a serial at the time. Bearing in mind I didn't know about the whole movie idea till after I finished reading. But there were two moments that frankly completely broke my immersion while reading this. Don't get me wrong, there were a few scenarios where the author embellished a little much and went a bit overboard with the spectacle. Stuff you couldn't have pulled off back in the 70s, but I respect and understand that this isn't a film script, this is a novel. And of course there would be the temptation to add outlandish stuff in there. But the two moments that pulled me right out of it, as spoiler-free as possible, were Sarah Jane Smith, Elizabeth Sladen, playing a newspaper reporter character, falling and doing trapeze-esque maneuvers whilst tumbling down a giant clock tower. Like something out of Jurassic Park 2, I just couldn't picture it. And the second was a giant, let's say, pinball table, but combined with chess and poker and spoilers stuff. Just, what? Take the scene from the end of Philosopher's Stone and add in a dozen more elements. Both of these moments were responsible for my biggest breaks between resuming the novel or audiobook, because while not the worst thing ever, were just a little bit too outlandish for me to remain invested in. But I want to amplify the fact that for every odd, not quite fitting feeling moment, there were some truly top-tier story beats, moments, interactions. A short comedic sequence where Harry pulls some genuine comedic slapstick moves to narrowly avoid death over and over again, having no idea how close he came to dying. The TARDIS room, with Sarah Jane Smith's life and history splayed out on display, giving us glimpses into her past, her possible future, even subtle hints at her Hand of Fear departure, and even her son in the Sarah Jane Smith adventures. Okay, that bit, that whole scene of pages of her seeing moments of her life actually got me choked up a bit. Like, there's a little more subtextual moments like that where Tom is acknowledging the real world fact that he's the last one left. More on that later. There was one end of chapter cliffhanger that got me so good. I'm not kidding. After a particularly rough patch that took me a week to get through, out of absolutely nowhere, with a fantastic build-up, came a reveal that I somehow did not see coming. It had been so well set up with subtle hints that only work in the medium of this being a book, because, well, if you're watching it on TV as an episode, then you're obviously going to see what's coming. But because my brain hadn't put 2 and 2 together yet, and I somehow hadn't glanced at the bottom of the page, when I finished the chapter, I had a huge reaction. I wish I could talk about it, but it's a pretty cool surprise, and a considerable spoiler for anyone that hasn't read the book. So instead, I will just show you a little clip I recorded of my immediate reaction. Oh, that is a twist. That is a reveal right there. End of chapter 14. Almost makes the 132-page build-up worth it. Now, don't let me overhype it. It was a great moment of excitement, but it didn't last longer than a quick conversation before the story immediately pivots from the long night and into Scratchman. Come to think of it, it is a bit of a jarring shift, though I suppose you could excuse that with the fact that the novel is actually split into 2 books. You know, otherwise it'd be like going from EastEnders to Star Trek. That might have been what finally caused me to give up on finishing reading and switching to the audiobook, because it took me 2 months of slow progress to get through the first book. Then I reached this amazing moment with an appearance from something that I love, and then the next page, it's a complete tonal shift that's just so jarring. I just thought, nah, it's going to take me forever to get through this. And, for what it's worth, there are benefits for both reading and listening to the story. I know this isn't really a review of the Scratchman audiobook, but I will say, yes, you are definitely getting your money's worth if you decide to pick up the audiobook. I would have loved to have bought the CD version, but man, I thought the Big Finish productions were expensive, but this one, whew! There are moments from both versions that appeal more to me, and there are moments that are less impactful than the other option. Does that make sense? For example, that big reveal I just spent several minutes gushing over. The way my inner monologue read it and how I pictured it in my mind was super impactful and epic. Like, he stood there, menacingly. A stoic figure, awesomeness flowing on the breeze. The doctor couldn't believe his eyes. Terence had arrived. But when Tom read that line in the audiobook, it was more, the doctor looked up, and Terence was standing above him. So my imagination obviously put more weight on that reveal than Tom felt was necessary in the recording booth, but, you know, to each their own. But then, if you're reading the book, then you're missing out on hearing all of Tom's charming quirks, and I swear, he straight up breaks character, or breaks the fourth wall at one point, addressing the listener like, a narrator's allowed to do that? Is that something you can get away with in Audible? I doubt it, but old mate Tom got away with it, and it brung a giant smile to my face.
That's why some of us leave. Know what I mean?
Speaking of Terence, spoiler cameo, because yes, there is fan service here. There are, a couple of cameos. Some cameos have just the slightest, subtle, one-off lines used to explain who they might be. Like a character shows up partway through the second book. I'm like, was that River Song? Was it the Fugitive Doctor? Who was that? Who knows? Tom clearly had fun writing some of these. The woman with the rainbow striped across her hearts was a bit more on the nose, but I mean, hey, that's Tom's whole thing, isn't it? Unless you're some random Redditor whinging on the internet, in which case, shush. Now that I'm saying it out loud, the whole its writing never loses its sparkle thing kind of makes sense. Because right from the start, along with the expansive vocabulary, the whole thing is written with the Fourth Doctor's signature cheek and charm. And for what it's worth, the Fourth Doctor's not been a bit of a dickhead in this story for a change, which is nice. Moving on. TARDIS lore. If there's 2 things I like to keep track of in my reviews, it's inexplicable Time Lord superpowers that show up for a single serial and are rarely seen ever again, and new revelations into the mechanics of the TARDIS. According to this book, the TARDIS's internal structure constantly changes, similar to the magic moving staircase from the Harry Potter series. Heck, even acting similar to the Room of Requirement. I don't buy it. Reconfiguring the console room alongside the Doctor's regenerations? Sure, makes sense. But swapping out an entire stone grand staircase for an electronic escalator over the span of a few minutes? Nah, that's almost as impossible to believe as friggin' transmigration of object. Yes, I am never letting that go. I'm really starting to feel the runtime now, which means I'm sure most of you have either clicked off or fallen asleep. Sweet dreams. So I just really want to quickly power through some of my last through miscellaneous thoughts before settling some loose threads. Let's fire through some bullet points, shall we? Yes, I bought a whiteboard. No, you can't look at my notes. The whole giant imagination game thing, you know, one of the two moments that I completely lost focus in. It's similar in a way, I guess, to the Celestial Toymaker's Domain, or even the Mind Robber. Fun observation. I'm sure many of you Whovians must be wondering, Doctor Who plus scarecrows, does that mean there's a connection to you-know-what? Well, have no fear, dear viewer, for yes, I believe there is a subtle, blink and you'll miss it, yet almost direct reference to Wurzel Gummidge. What, you were thinking Family of Blood? No, Wurzel is far more terrifying than Sister of Mine, and Scratchman, and Mavis Tulloch, all combined. Typos. That's all the bullet point says. It's interesting that in the entire novel, 2 books worth of content, and I could only find a single typo. As casually as an battery. There you go. Yes, I know, I technically listened to the second book and you can't hear typos, shush. However, with all that being said, the typos I mean, and yes, I'm about to get very specific and nitpicky, I point that out because I'm guessing the editor, or proofreader, or whoever, called it quits once the main book was done, because all of the bonus stuff is just full of small grammatical errors. Innocuous yet noticeable mistakes, like an entire line of text having no spaces, accidentally hitting the caps lock key in the middle of spelling someone's name, a random space in the middle of a word, a casual misprint. This is all very superfluous stuff. But I bring it up because, well, I don't know about you, but it always felt satisfying to me finding a mistake in an officially published book. Like you were uncovering something special that nobody was ever supposed to notice. Doubly so if it was in an official textbook for school or university that you were expected to pay for. I really hope someone else can relate to that. Otherwise... Moving on, bonus features. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. I know this isn't a DVD or anything, and yet it contains several fun extras at the very end, including a message from the Doctor, a letter from Sarah Jane Smith, a fantastic, heartwarming and heartbreaking epilogue, a weird poem, and of course, a big old behind-the-scenes write-up on the history of Doctor Who meets Scratchman, and a brilliant one-on-one interview with Tom Baker. And it's here where I want to touch on all those moments throughout this review where I've said more on that later, or I'll talk about that at the end, because it was during this interview where a suspicion of mine was confirmed. Going into this, I was doing so with the knowledge that this was something Tom Baker himself did when he was around 85 years old. Yes, there were no doubt editors and co-author James Goss, who isn't credited anywhere else in the book. Seriously, I had to Google what his involvement was. But here was a Doctor Who story written by a Doctor Who actor. And that was special enough. But the fact that Tom did it in 2019 at his advanced age, I had to wonder if that might impact this product at all. And again, with the interviews in mind, it absolutely does. I don't want to make something out of nothing or speak meaning into something that wasn't intended, but in a mixture of personal interpretation and real-world current-year circumstances, in a way, Scratchman represents a final send-off to Tom Baker. His Doctor, his era, his time on Earth. There are moments, little lines here and there, because they're from the Doctor's perspective. It's very clearly a representation about how Tom feels about his real-world friends, Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter. How he feels about his Doctor, his place in the show, his role in Doctor Who history. Again, I might be reaching, and it might sound pretentious, but having a conversation with your other selves, in real or metaphorical senses, it takes a lot of self-awareness on his behalf to put these words to page. And I guess what I'm dancing around is this undeniable truth that I've never mentioned in any of my reviews, but has been on my mind since I started this review series in 2021. The same thing that was on my mind when I saw him show up in Day of the Doctor. The same thought that I'm sure has popped into every Whovian's mind. Tom Baker, the oldest living Doctor actor, will die one day. Death's natural, it's a part of life, but there's something unique about Tom because William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee had all long since passed away when the show's revival happened in 2005. Any time a classic series actor has passed away since then, it's been shocking and painful. I mean, just look at Liz Sladen. But in all that time, the Fourth Doctor has always still been alive. Somehow, after all these years, he just keeps kicking. And we're left to speculate, safe in the knowledge that he's living his life quietly somewhere in the UK. But, and I'm sure I'm not alone in wondering this, he's already got an incredible legacy, but what would end up being his final Doctor Who project? Well, I think it's Scratchman. And he does too. In one of the final questions of the Q&A, when asked if he would consider writing another Doctor Who book, he speaks very candidly. No, no more. I walk in the woods every morning with my dog and my cats, and I'm happy at home in the garden, and to go shopping and meet old fans, but otherwise, I think this is my final flourish. I must be at the end of my life, I suppose. The one thing that is left to me now that I'm filled with hope for is that this project, Doctor Who and Scratchman, will be the success that I used to dream about and now makes my old heart jump. The story is a good story and it's worth telling, and I think they'll love it. One day, maybe in many years to come, maybe sooner, hopefully not too soon, Tom will pass away. And in the tremendous outpouring of sorrow, grief, sharing stories and happy memories, I believe many Whovians will look for Tom's final hurrah in the Whoniverse. And they'll find this book. And they'll buy and read or listen to Scratchman. It's the biggest reason why I wanted this video to be so spoiler-free. Because one day, Scratchman will have a bunch more attention all at once. And whether you're a new fan, or you grew up with the 2000s series, or you're an old-timer who used to huddle round the CRT with your family and watch black and white Daleks, and maybe even met one at a convention once, whether you read between the lines or take things at face value, I'm sure everyone will find some form of closure to take away from this book, whether it be a moment, a line of dialogue, a wink at the audience. This isn't Tom's goodbye yet, but I think one day it will be, and nowhere does that stand out to me more than in the final line of this story, which I'll let him read it for himself.
With a cheery wave at the future, I turned and went to play on the beach with my friends forever.
And that's where the Fourth Doctor will forever be. I think if the 14th Doctor can bi-generate and live the rest of his life happily with his best friends, going on unseen adventures, then that's where the Fourth Doctor will be. Playing on a beach with two of his closest friends, Sarah and Harry, for all time. Scratchman isn't a perfect book. I struggled in parts and was enthralled in others. If it wasn't written by Tom Baker and just some other random author, I would probably still feel the same. But one thing's for sure, it certainly wouldn't have that signature Tom Baker charm. And I think this is one heck of a way for him to bow out of the spotlight and enjoy the rest of his retirement with his cat and his dog. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry that this took so long, and sorry if this ended up being a rambling, incoherent video. It's been a while since I've been on camera, and I am well out of practice when it comes to script making. Also, over the past 5 months, whenever someone's asked me when I'm going to shave my beard, I tell them that I'm only growing it out until I finish reading this book. So now I can finally shave it off. And yes, that does mean that I only grew this for the purposes of a little joke bit at the start of this video. You're welcome.